And thank you for giving us this space today. It's really exciting to present the project to my colleagues and also people across the university, so thank you very much. So exactly as Amos said, we were very lucky to receive our funding in July, and officially we launched the project in September. The name of the project is Giving Back Credit to Heritage Communities, and we're using the hashtag #GiveBackCredit. And the social media aspect of this project is quite pertinent, and Andrea is going to talk to you a little bit a bit later on about the starting point of this, which was actually the Give Credit, which came from Le Blouses Remain, which is what Andrea started. Andrea, how many years ago now was Le Blouses Remain? I'm not sure Angela can hear me. Andrea can hear me.
Hello, good afternoon from Bucharest, Romania. I can't hear you very well, Fran, but I will try to follow the slides as we prepared. First of all, I would like to thank you and to thank all of you for supporting Give Back Credit and being partnered to Give Back Credit to the Heritage Community Project, co-founded by European Commission through the Creative Europe program. Yes, my name is Andreea Tanasescu. I'm the founder of La Blouses Romania Association, and I launched Give Credit campaign in 2017. I'm specialized in cultural movements, in creative direction, social media, and talent management. My background is from movie production. And I'm involved in this new kind of storytelling, hoping that our project to be a huge opportunity for a guerrilla style activist campaign like Give Credit to bridge the gap between creative industries and heritage communities, facilitating new perspective in design process, creating new possibilities of creative expression and cultural sustainability.
Hi, and I'm Fran Sheldon. Some of you might already know me, but I am a Trend and Sustainability Lecturer in the Business School for the Creative Industries as part of UCA. And I have a background more from the trend side. So that's how me and Andrea met, and we'll talk a little bit about our collaboration as well. And my purpose in this project is to look more into the operational aspects of the fashion business sector and how we have worked with it previously with cultural heritage communities, and looking at the best way forward for that and thinking about best practice, some of the legal operations that come into that, and also in terms of education as well. And both me and Andrea are really believe in the power of education within this subject. So in terms of our manifesto, I think so Andrea's already beautifully described where this project comes from and why it's so important. But one of the things I really wanted to draw your attention to is in terms of the opportunities of this project as well. So the opportunity to adjust our practices and work in a more preserving and protective way when we're working with heritage communities. And in terms of the scope of this project, we're starting with Le Blouses Remain and specifically European artisans and craftsmen. But what we really truly believe is that if we can make something work from that perspective, that we can grow this and actually make it work from a more of a global fashion perspective as well. Do you want to add anything to that, Andrea?
Yes, Give Credit is based on our movement, because in 2017, La Blouses Remain community, which I founded in 2013, started a Give Credit campaign as a response of Tory Burch's 2008 Restart collection, which included a copy of Romanian code from Oltenia region that has described as African inspiration. In the same year, Christian Dior copied a traditional Romanian sheepskin vest from Beiuș, Bihor County in Transylvania, and presented in the pre-fall 2017 collection as a Bohemian vest. We launched the Bihor No Dior and Give Credit campaign, and we received a huge international support, mainly on social media. So even since the Give Credit Instagram and Facebook accounts have been raising awareness about similar cases of cultural design plagiarism and appropriation. In fact, with every season, new cases of so-called cultural appropriation appear, and so far we did not see actual solutions put in place. On one hand, these practices are clearly controversial, and the fashion industry should at least give credit to the originating communities and creators. On the other hand, there is not much legal certainty in respect to what protection mechanism could be enforced for the preservation of this often intangible heritage. So the new project, Give Back Credit, aims to work out a more balanced and constructive approach and use this opportunity to revive, repurpose, and reward the European-wide sector of textile craftsmanship. So such a complex issue needs to be addressed from different angles, and the resulting solutions ought to be realistic and profitable both to the artisan communities and the fashion labels. So as the final outcome of the project, we could help the fashion industry turn towards a more responsible approach, and at the same time open new opportunities for the European artisans and craftsmanship to get involved. This project is proposed by La Blouses Romania Association as a project leader, supported by the Romanian Institute of Cultural Heritage, the University of Creative Arts, Epson Business School, and Gordana Grubšević, PR Superstar Culture from Serbia.
Thank you, Andreea. That's like the perfect introduction to the project, and I can see in the chat as well there's lots of interest, so definitely have a look at that. In terms of how me and Andreea met as well, you would have saw a lovely photo of Andreea in our classroom at the Business School for the Creative Industries, and we were lucky enough to have Andreea come and speak to our second year trend forecasting students, which is the unit that I'm currently teaching at the moment with our fashion management and marketing students at the Business School. And why that's so significant to this project is, just like I said with Andreea earlier, we both believe education is a really important part of this project. And in terms of trend forecasting education, it's something that needs to be taught in terms of correct ways of design development and inspiration, and not confusing inspiration with creative plagiarism. And for me, I think that's really interesting from the point of view of exactly what Andrea is saying in terms of the outcomes of this project and changing the industry's processes. One of the main things is the difficulty with the speed of the industry and how fast it's working, and the compliance with that pace means that a lot of designers and buyers are seeking quick ways to develop designs. And so a lot of this speed up that Andrea is talking about every year, every collection, you know, there's something to see in terms of cultural appropriation. A lot of that is linked to our sustainability issues within the industry and the pace that we're working at as well. What I wanted to talk to you in terms of some of the difficulties with the project as well. So in the kind of beginning aspects of looking for these issues. So my background working with Edited is a lot looking at data analysis. So I'm quite keen on employing that within this project. And I know that Andrea's had some background in the past with some really great marketing campaigns, changing the images within Google, and very much relisting things and making sure that the original La Blouses remain is actually the ones that are foregrounded on Google, as opposed to fakes or copies. So for my part, I'm quite interested in establishing, first of all, a view on the identity of cultural plagiarism within the market. So how do we understand that at a global scale? We have to use data. We have to understand the listings of items, and also thinking about how people are using copy within product descriptions, and the way that they're using wording, and making sure that both tangible and intangible aspects of that cultural heritage are preserved. Also, the second aspect is how to identify if credit has been given appropriately. So how do we measure that? And the third difficulty is also how to identify if it's been given accurately. And so I'm just going to talk you through some of the issues when we're looking at data in terms of that. So like I said, I've previously worked at Edited, so I'm quite comfortable looking at market analytics at a scale like this. So when I was looking in there, I could see what I used was a quite abductive approach in terms of using the terminology that we know already, and that I've learned from Andrea's wonderful project has been used and misinterpreted using this language. So Le Blues Remain actually being misinterpreted as gypsy, peasant, and bohemian. And there's some really interesting research I've learned from my fellow colleagues, including Andreea and Linda Fitzwater, in terms of how difficult that language is. And so I uncovered 438 blouses that actually came up, and they're retailing in the UK currently under those names. So they use, in terms of data, is pulling those names from their product descriptions or the names of the products. And I think that's quite significant because that's quite a large amount. And obviously another aspect of this research would be compared to whether there's a description of Le Blues Remain at all. And then when I actually dug into that, so the other great thing about data is it will understand patterning and behaviours a little bit faster than humans. And I was able to locate some of the key brands I wanted to look at. So Etro and Isabel Marant, we know that their aesthetics are kind of quite driven towards that. They quite often use the word nomad, which in itself is quite problematic. And then there is Free People and Monsoon as well that came up quite high in this list in terms of the amount of products that they had under those names. And that was quite interesting to me as well, because they also rely on that issue. But you can see just how this impacts luxury, but also mass market as well. So then what I did was have a look at these products in specific. So that's the great thing about data, is it can kind of drive you down to more of a qualitative approach. So I started to look at these blouses. This one, the Isabel Marant blouse, and also the Etro blouse. And you can see there's definitely some similarities in terms of the actual silhouettes, but also the print as well, which is print on silk, but it's made to look as if it's woven. And this one's retailing at Net-a-Porter. And then I had a look at these John Lewis blouses, a Monsoon one, and also an East one as well, which again, another brand that kind of relies on that artisanal look. And when I kind of dug a little bit deeper and I started to actually read the product description, that word again, bohemian, nomadic, all problematic words, because they, I mean, without being able to establish where this inspiration has come from, even the wording itself is slightly reductive. So what I did was have a look at how often this word is being used alongside Isabel Marant, not in a data way, but in a research-driven way. I actually searched for the word nomadic next to Etro. I was quite interested in this review from the 2020 ready-to-wear collection from Vogue, and the way it says that it's kind of got a kind of a get-out-of-jail-free card with the word cultural appropriation. It's allowed in Etro because they do it so much, which obviously is a difficult issue that me and Andreea are going to have to come up against, you know, in terms of how people understand cultural appropriation and what people feel is right and wrong in terms of that. And then I went back to the data. So what I did next was employ visual search. So you can use visual search, which is essentially a bionic eye, which understands the similarity. So it uses a similarity algorithm between a given data set. So there's Google, but there's also Pinterest. So I took this blouse because I didn't really know. I haven't got the expertise of Andreea. So I didn't know where this inspiration was taken from. But all I had was that it was called a Bohemian nomadic blouse, and I wondered whether it was an example of cultural appropriation. So I used visual search, and you can see the little dots is when the Pinterest is working with the image. Problems at first with using visual search was that it tended to understand the silhouette. So there's obviously, in terms of the way that algorithm is written, it's using mostly the shape, which is something to identify in terms of whether we were going to use visual search a little bit more within this project. And so what I did was use a more in-depth picture, and we can see that it started to bring more similar images up, and we can see that was a tapestry that was brought up. And so I went in again, and this time it brought up a Persian rug. So what that told me was that using this approach is going to be slightly problematic, mostly because of the data set. So I was using Pinterest there, so we'd need a clean data set provided by someone that knows what they're talking about, like Andreea. And then what we would need to use is make sure that the algorithm for that similarity method is actually built on a system for patterns rather than a system for silhouette. And then there were some other examples as well. So I went back to the East example here, and what I found particularly interesting was I was led to this via John Lewis, so it's currently retailing on John Lewis's site, and I noticed that the John Lewis copy stripped away any of the cultural mentions that were in the East copy. So you can see it takes away the cardi part of the blouse, and also within the actual product copy itself, it really strips it back. So sentences from the East, from the actual brand website, Aliyah is a classic shape with a bohemian spin, seems to lose that. And again, using visual search, having a look at some of those details, we can just see just the amount of different cultures that are coming up in these searches. So again, it would be so much more helpful to have a clean data set, but in itself is an issue, because can we agree on what shapes and what details come from which region? And I think a lot of what our research, in terms of what me and Andreea and the rest of the team have already discussed, is that there's so many blurred aspects, especially with the region that we are going to be focusing on in terms of Romania, and we've also got participants from Serbia, and that blurring of some of those cultures that are pre-boundaries, pre-modern day boundaries and borders. So I think that's kind of the end of my little foray into data. I know there were some questions in there, so I'll definitely pick up on those at the end if that's okay. What I wanted to do is hand over to Andreea now, who is going to talk a little bit about the scope of our project and how we're going to try and tackle some of these issues that we've brought up. Also, yeah, sorry, just to outline some of the events coming up as well that we'd love anybody that's interested in this project to participate in some way. And I've got a form at the end that I'd love people to interact with and provide names and email addresses if you would like some interest or show your interest. So, Andreea, in terms of our plans activities, you've written so much on this project, it must have been quite hard to bring it down to a few pages.
Thank you, Fran. Unfortunately, I can't hear you at all, so I will stick also with the slides. Talking about our specific objectives and plan activities for give back credits. So first, of course, our objective is to properly assess the barriers that prevent the artisan communities to be included and or remunerated fashion industry when creating collections inspired by the traditional artifacts. A special emphasis will be placed on the international legal framework applicable to the intangible cultural heritage and to the business models used by fashion industry. To this end, one webinar and 2 master classes will be organized, and international experts will be invited to contribute. All the hard questions will be tackled, such as how can we really protect the intangible cultural heritage? What is the existing international legal framework for intellectual property protection? Can we improve it? Can you use the right to follow? Designate a geographical indication protections, or what solutions were found by national legislation? How to make profit as fashion brand when paying a fair amount to the creators, artisan, and other skilled workers in the value chain? What tailored business models could best apply to the artisan communities, and how to get them to be more involved in the negotiation for international trade agreements with source countries. Of course, one of the most important objectives is to draft a cultural sustainability charter for culturally respectful fashion that will include recommendation to the fashion industry in regards to promoting more responsible and culturally aware collections and on overall sustainable business approach. The fashion labels will be invited to sign this charter and to endorse the principles. Also to elaborate a methodological handbook for the artisan communities with clear and tailored information regards IP protection, applicable business plans, training and exchange resources, innovation opportunities and limitation, social media options and management and prospects for the future. One of the highlights of the project is to create unique opportunities for cultural exchanges by setting up 2 creative residencies dedicated to 2 iconic elements of the European craftsmanship and culture, the Romanian Blouses, also called IA, and the Scottish tartan, of course. The partners will launch an open call for designers to take part in these residencies that will take place within the traditional artisan communities in Romania and in the UK. The designers will discover firsthand the traditional know-how of the artisans and also the deep meanings embedded in the traditional patterns. They will use the inspiration to create limited fashion collection, and it has been planned to produce the collection partially on site together with the artisans and partially with the premises of University for the Creative Arts. The resulting outfits will be presented during the fashion show in Belgrade, Serbia, and in a temporary display during an exhibition in Bucharest, Romania. Of course, to establish an international cultural fashion day, referring, I guess, as a term coined especially by African and Asian fashion weeks in order to highlight the traditional knowledge or traditional cultural expression embedded in the design of the local collection. And this celebration, it has the potential to be also a global solution for defining a new genre of fashion that can play a huge role in developing rural or indigenous communities and preserving humanity's intangible cultural heritage. In 2017, we, La Blouse Roumaine, launched the idea of the Global Cultural Fashion Day in order to bridge a sustainable and ethical dialogue between artisan communities and fashion industry around the world. Also, advise the public owners about this issue through communication campaigns, tools, and products, dedicated website, of course, social media accounts, a documentary film on the creative residencies, and a high quality photo album with the collection and the inspirational source. At last, and not at least, to pursue the cooperation within the institutional network, our specific objectives will be along the principles of the Sustainable Fashion Charter, to follow up various issues resulting from cultural appropriation practices. This collaborative European network will be open to the institutions and organizations willing to join.
Okay. Thank you so much, Andreea. So there are some specific UCA activities, but the project as a whole has a lot of scope, and just be mindful that we have just started this project. So in terms of the way that this could be navigated, we're still quite open about the latter part of the project. At the beginning, we really just want to work out what the actual issue is, how do we tackle that and approach that. And I think in the chat, there is absolutely all of these questions that we've had within our own webinars and our own Zoom calls, as well as a research team. So what we would really love, though, is there's a QR code on the screen, and I'll also add into the chat a link to actually kind of join our mailing list in terms of this project, or we'd also be interested if you wanted to participate in the project as well. So I'm just going to add that into the chat for anybody, or you can use the QR code on the screen as well, the link to that form, just so that we can gather kind of a crowd of people that are interested in this. But for now, I just wanted to say mulțumesc, which I hope I pronounced that right, Andreea. I've lost Andrea's video.
We try to take some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can see there's some in the chat. I'm just checking up. What's Andrea's connection like?
It's red. It's totally reconnecting now.
Oh no.
So I think we can call out the comments rather than reading it. So we will try to do it more interactive way. I can see a comment from Catherine Harper, our Deputy Vice Chancellor. Catherine, do you want to make a comment?
In a sense, I have put some questions and comments in the chat line. I think there are some really interesting comments coming through from various colleagues. I think Frank has built up the idea of, you know, what is a culture, what is a nationality, and there's a Dr. No who's on the line as well here with some really interesting discussions. So I feel like an amateur in this, so I'll bow out and let others who are more knowledgeable speak.
Not an amateur at all. This is the great thing about this project, is it's such a discovery-based project. So in essence, we're all amateurs at the point of this. But yes, thank you. I think happy to hand over to Frank or Nadia if you had questions. I think Victoria had some great ones in as well.
Dr. Frank, do you want to chip in? Very interesting comments.
Well, comments are there. I think there's a real issue about culture and nationality, and particularly in places like the Balkans and the Middle East, where there are cultural traditions and a lot of disputes over nationality, and we quite easily name things, you know, through nationality, and they're not necessarily, there's no correlation with the cultural origins. But I think if you are going to, if this is a research project, you're going to have to define those terms much more rigorously, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, this is one of the key aspects of the project we picked up on, Frank. So I think the issue here is we need fixed points in terms of being able to categorize and analyze against a particular aspect. So like you say, are we talking about culture or are we talking about nationality? The issue we have is, from a legal perspective, nationality is more readily understood from a legal perspective than, say, culture. So this is where we've got this blur, and that is why very much we are having to look at it from both of those angles in terms of the protections that are currently out there are mostly IP based, which is more protective in a way of the appropriator than the appropriated. the designer tends to be more protected than the inspiration source, for example. And when you're talking about the difference between nationality and culture, we've got the issue of borders that are recognised in 2020 not necessarily having any relationship with culture, and those two things are very different. So I think we're going to have to not necessarily define it, but we are going to have to understand why, how we can make fixed points like legal structures work for things that maybe aren't so fixed. You see what I mean?
Yes, and really, even a word like culture, you know, is a struggle in itself to define, because you're reifying something which really is a process rather than an actual representation. So it's a really difficult project. You have to come up with some kind of wording, or really be clear about what you're talking about. Because I mean, having lived in the Balkans, nationality and identity and cultural heritage is, well, as you know from all the conflict there, this is an absolute minefield to say something is from a certain country or a certain cultural tradition. So anyway, that's just a comment.
No, yeah, really helpful. And I mean, Andreea, you might want to chip in as well here. We've discussed about the sensitivities as well of this subject, especially since the case study that we've taken, Le Blouses Remain, has that aspect of the Balkan sensitivities that you've spoken about. Andreea, I didn't know if you wanted to chime in on that one.
Andreea,
I think Andreea might be having some issues in audio, which is such a shame.
there is an interesting comment from Dr. N.O. If you want to tell us more about the 80s experience, very interesting.
Yes, I used to supply Liberties and other department stores with vintage garments. What was quite interesting is basically sourcing some of the, they obviously had to be in pristine condition. So I found some monsoon garments actually. They were considered too ethnic for the departments to actually sell as vintage. They didn't do retro and they didn't do ethnic. So, but it was interesting because some of them had their tags still hanging on them, and it told you all about the origins and how you had to be careful. So the washing instructions and so on. But in that, they also told you the story of where this garment came from. So obviously, even the high street used to be a little bit more careful, and in fact, they were actually the traditional garments themselves. So they said that they were made by Pashtun tribes of Afghanistan. If you consider when that was and what happened to Afghanistan shortly afterwards, that those are very important garments from a historic point of view, even in terms just of a high street. I also want to talk about luxury brands like Hermes, who do scarf designs year after year, season after season, using, as just picking up on Catherine Harper's point, actually, a lot of the designs and cultural signifiers go back to a kind of fantasy historic time. So thinking about just a few years ago, when one of the artists did a sort of a landscape of Caucasians, many who were ran out of that part of the world and now live in places like the Middle East and all over the world seeking sanctuary. It reflects back on a kind of romanticized time, or perhaps a real time, but a very different time to the now. And that often, when we looking at these peasant, for the want of a better words, these approximations of it, they tend to be kind of historic costume type things that we have in our head of fantasy, rather than the purist versions of the garment, or even the modern type wear that are worn ceremonially now. Sorry, that's it.
Always love a Dr. No comment. Thank you. I think in terms of, it was really interesting what you were saying at the beginning as well, in terms of Liberty's connection with local ethnic. And I feel like that's an interesting move from them, considering really as a department store, their business model was built on the idea of a collection of otherness, essentially. And I think actually Frank kind of touches on at the end, a kind of exoticism that you kind of see within V&A, as well as this collection of other things that almost add a bit of fantasy. It's also interesting thinking about maybe before now, if there's been some compliance with that fantasy narrative in terms of marketing and promotion to get products sold, and whether we are now having a slight change in that, and how much we can take back in terms of that as well. Andreea, is your connection a little bit better now? I'm not sure if Andreea can hear. Andreea, can you hear?
I don't think we can.
No, okay. Maybe I'll just see if Andreea wants
I can hear just, you know, bits, but I can't understand at all what you're saying, because it feels like the connection is not stable, something like this.
Oh, okay.
So, I think so. We have an invitation for you both to present your work on the Center for Sustainable Design Conference 2029. I hope you can do something there and start publishing. Catherine said you can publish in the textile and cloth and culture, and it is a very interesting project, and it is all the red light on impact stuff. As a research of it, we always search for impact, and it's very interesting, and we will look forward to work with you more. And I have a question actually in terms of beyond Europe, international, specifically in Africa. What is your plan? Do you plan to go international on this?
So at the moment, we're going to keep the project within the plans of the case study, which is very much set in Europe. But we hope that what we can discover at the moment is based on a discovery-based method. We're not so sure that we'll be able to find a solution, but if we can find anything that works and we can create some kind of protocol for that, then we would hope that we can test it on different cultures, different nationalities. I've said there's two words again, but we can just try and test it out in different case studies, probably the best way to say that as well.
So I think we can close this session now. Thank you very much for presenting your project, and thank you for the very insightful comments. I'm sure you will take this and run with it. Very interesting feedback. Thank you all, and please keep an eye on our schedule. Our next event is on the 24th of November at 1 with Shelley Goldsmith. She will talk about the Lucas of the dress. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.